everybody, Lee Scott here. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee, where we talk about life, leadership, and legacy and want to help you unleash your capacity and level of leadership. I'm so glad that you are here watching this episode. But if you have not done it yet, go and subscribe to Leading with Lee on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. So I'm so glad to be back sharing a new episode and new content here on Leading with Lee. As I said at the beginning of the season, you're going to be seeing me a little bit more infrequently because of just my schedule and some things have been changing in my life. But I do still want to put out episodes of Leading with Lee to motivate and encourage you to make a difference in your world and in the spaces that you're in. So I'm super excited for today because I'm going to share something that I've been thinking about in reflection over the last few months, but also really buckling down on some stuff that I really didn't get in depth to talk about. Now, as you all know, but before this year, as I was going into this year, I was running for office. I ran for city council here in Jackson, and I had a platform and some things that I wanted to share and talk about that I thought would be helpful to the people that I wanted to represent and wanted to serve in my community. And I thought it was really important to articulate those things and talk about those things on here because I didn't really get a chance in some ways to really get deep down into the weeds about this particular topic. So over the next few episodes, and I'm not going to do back to back, but at least three of the next three episodes or three out of the next four episodes, I'll be sharing on here about my experience, but some of the things that I really wanted to get into. So I want to share my title real quick, but before I get into the weeds, if I like to always give my definition of leadership, and I believe that leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. Leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. As I was stating earlier, I ran for office earlier this year, and there were some things that have come up as a result of me running for office, and it's made me think a lot about some of the things that I wanted to buckle down on today. And so this is the part one of a three-part conversation that we're going to be having, and I'm calling this episode "What I Would Have Said" Part One. What I would have said given the time, Part One. As I was just stating, I was running for office and different things was happening related to that. But one of the tenets of my platform that I was running on was restoring transparency with the public. And I think that was a really big thing because as our city is coming up on a general election here in a few weeks, literally, we are deciding our city's future. We're deciding what happens over the next 4 years. And it's really important that people have a perspective about what's happening. And I wanted to talk about transparency because one of the things that has been happening in our communities is there's been a lack of connectivity in some ways from the public to those who represent them. And one of the things I think that's really necessary is that elected officials be individuals that are reachable. They may not be everywhere at all times. And let's be clear, every public official can't do everything, right? Every public official cannot be everywhere, but they can attempt to engage in particular ways to make the public feel safe and feel as if they can touch them. And so there are three points today that I want to talk about related to this topic of restoring transparency with the public is number one, improving our information gaps. Number two, connect with community groups. And thirdly, be proactive in engagement. Now, let's deal with the first one, which is improving our information gaps. One of the tragedies, I think, in the community is that we deal with a lot of information gaps. This is not something that is atypical because it happens everywhere. It happens in relationships. It happens at work. It happens everywhere. I mean, depending on how big the organization you may work for or be a part of, there may be some information gaps that happens in the process. I remember as a kid, there was a game that we used to play where one person would be given some instructions and they would whisper this instruction in the person's ear. And everybody had to go around the circle and get back to the original person who gave the instructions. And most of the time, if you look at that game, most of the time, the thing that was said at the beginning will get lost in translation at some point when it gets back to the individual. Because what tends to happen with information is interpreted based on how a person hears it. I could be saying one thing, but you may receive it a particular way that I may not have any control of. We see it all the time on social media, how an individual will say that they like something or they feel strongly about something, and a variety of responses will happen. And I like to think about it this way. There are people that will take it at face value and say, okay, this person has a particular view on this thing. There are individuals that become historians and put historical context on why someone has this particular view. And then there are those who will just troll you, right? And those individuals have a particular agenda. But no matter who you may be or who you might what you might receive in those situations, there is an opinion about the information that's being presented. And we live in such a time where you can get information from any and everywhere. Just Google a particular topic and you may be able to find some information related to that thing, because information has the ability to transform the way you think. Even here in our city right now, there are things that are happening as this term comes to an end for the current leadership in our city, and a new one is possibly beginning for some. There's some people that won their primaries and they don't have opponents anymore. There's some people that won their primaries and have to win the general election in a few weeks. But no matter what the case is for these individuals, it is very clear that they are going to have to engage in sharing information with the people. I had this great experience this past week of going to an event hosted by the Jackson Youth Newsroom. And it was a very fascinating experience because these young people were brought together by a great organization that were trying to really give these kids an opportunity to learn about journalism, to learn about how that they can be very productive in how they share information. They were teaching these young people about how to write news stories, how to engage in conversations related to information that is important to them. They were engaging young people about youth-related topics and how these young people got an opportunity to interview some of our leaders and engage in conversations about how we can make our communities better. And it was a really unique experience because it showed me personally how much our youth is concerned about our city and how much our youth is concerned about what's happening in our greater society. And that may not be the subject that you are specifically concerned about, but there are concerns that you have. There are things that are important to you, and it's really necessary that you find a way to get clarity about those subjects. And so I think it's really important, especially now with there's so many information gaps, is that we utilize every tool that is readily available. As I stated earlier, you can get information from anywhere. Now, I think it's really important for leaders to verify information, right? That's essential that leaders verify the information that they are receiving, because at the end of the day, you have a responsibility to the people that you are affecting, whether you are a parent, whether you are a teacher or an educator or an employee or whatever. If you are engaging people, it's very necessary that you verify information. There was this adage that one of our former presidents had. It was called trust but verify. It was President Reagan who always talked about this idea. And it was rooted in this idea that, hey, we're going to have mutual trust here, but I'm going to do some additional digging to ensure that the information that I am receiving at this current moment is the proper information and that it will be beneficial to the people that I am responsible to and I am accountable to. And one thing I think that this is really important that we do that is, whether it be with your family members, whether it be with your friends, whether it be with individuals who are in your life, that you recognize that you have a responsibility to them and that you give the best quality information. Not only do we use that information, receive that information, but use how we distribute that information is really important. Press releases, print materials, mailers, social media, using influencers in a particular community can be essential to how you grow something. There's somebody I know here in our city who's very involved in community-based work. He's been on Leading with Q Markane. Q Markane is someone who I respect, and I find him to be a great voice in our community. But Kumar has done a great job. He's involved in this thing called the Jackson Run Club, and Kumar has been in this thing for a while. And every time I look up, he's got this thing with the Jackson Run Club where he's sharing content about that. He has a podcast where he shares content about certain things. It's called Mental Shampoo. I know it's on my podcast, but I'm talking about his. But he uses his resources with social media, and he has a radio show, and he does all these different things to engage in ways so that people can know about the community of involvement that they can have and actually engage in our community. He has become an influencer in our community, and he uses his platform there to that end. He takes the time to engage people, and he uses his platform to be an asset to the subjects that he cares about. Now, when it comes down to these things, it's really essential that you bear in mind the impact of the sharing. People that know me very well, I am very, very, very intentional about what I say in certain spaces. Even as you're listening to me or probably watching me right now, everything that I'm going to say on this podcast or when you're watching this on YouTube, I'm very intentional about what I say. Why? Because it is in representation of who I am, but it's also information about me or the subject that I'm talking about. So I think it's critically important that I say certain things and be a man of my word or be able to back up what I'm saying. This is critical because we live in an environment where people share information or have stories quite often. People share half-truths quite often. People share a perspective about a truth quite often. Then you could have 2 or 3 people looking at the same thing and get a different interpretation of the thing. Why? Because they are looking at the information based on a set of preconceived notions that they just have. They have premeditated beliefs about certain things that are happening in their community. They have premeditated beliefs about certain aspects of the world that you and I cannot control. You can't control how somebody receives information. You just can't. What you can control is how you distribute that information and how you go about ensuring that people receive the truth in those particular moments. And I think it is critically important that we not be afraid to engage in a way of transparency and saying, hey, I'm going to just give you the information. Do what you will with the information. But I was honest with you about what I believe that you needed to hear, whether good or bad. Whether it benefits me or not, I am driven by the idea of giving you the information because I know that at the end of the day, you have to receive what I'm giving to you. Whether I like it or not, whether I agree with the information I'm giving you or not, whether I'm a beneficiary or puts me in a better position, I have to give the information. And let me tell you something about information sharing. There is a lot that can happen as a result of you sharing information. There's a lot that can happen. As I've stated, you can't control people's responses, but all you can do is be really intentional about it. Now, I've seen people be very intentional about information sharing in the sense that it is personally beneficial. It may not be mutually beneficial at all. So, you've seen it happen in relationships. I've seen it happen in friendships or with people. We've seen it on television shows. How oftentimes, if you are a fan of certain reality shows, you have seen how people will share information that they have been given in a particular way to try to embarrass someone or try to expose somebody or try to make someone look bad, right? And that becomes the driving force by which they share information. And we need some level of transparency. But in our role to operate with transparency, we must ensure that those who are being transparent with are receiving the necessary information so that they can feel safe and secure. And that we are not gaslighting them. Because that leads me to my second point, connect with community groups. One thing I recognized as I was running for office and why I got involved in certain groups and certain organizations was that there were folks that are already out there doing the work. I've shared this on here before. I was involved in the Association of South Jackson Neighborhoods, and for years, these folks have been doing work in our community. They've been hosting events in our community for years. They have a meeting once a month where they engage about information related to what's happening in our communities. That's a part of trying to grow. But if we're trying to restore some level of trust in systems, which is a big picture issue, right? We're talking about something that literally is a fundamental problem in our country and culture right now. You cannot trust information that's coming from certain individuals because you don't even know if they have vetted the information themselves before they released it, because there is a lack of trust in the integrity of the information. And we live in an environment where we look for information that confirms our own biases. I mean, I could spend a whole episode talking about that. How we only will take something that's truth if we like the individual. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always telling the truth. But we tend to receive information better if we have an affinity towards an individual. And the thing about transparency is sometimes you got to recognize as a leader that I don't have the type of credibility with certain groups of people. If there's something that's happening in your community or something that's happening in your city or something that's happening in the places where you are, it's critically important that you connect with leaders who literally have credibility with those people. It's a must. It's a must. You can't simply be successful without doing that. You must make it your business to connect with folks who have credibility. I mean, it's just what it is. You can't be mad if someone just simply is more believable than you. When I was a part of the Change Collective and the inaugural group of folks who was in the Change Collective here in Jackson, one thing I learned very quickly is that you got all these great people doing great stuff. And all these folks who are engaged in our communities in very profound ways. And all of these folks who are engaged in profound things in our community in a bunch of great ways are doing this work in conjunction with the community, whether they be the community leader or not. They are operating in the context of what they live. Prime example of this. We had a Change Collective event not too long ago, where at this event, an organization that was not necessarily here in Jackson decided to come and intentionally engage in working with folks in our city. They came into the city to say, hey, we are not the experts about what happens here in Jackson, but we want to come and partner with what you already have going on. We want to come alongside with the resources and the relationships to help you all do or not only just do, but enhance or magnify or maximize the work that you're already doing. We know we can't replace you. We know we can't outdo you. We know we can't get in the way of what we're doing. So let us come alongside and try to engage in that. Because when you give information, people trust that you know what you're talking about. Listen. I think it's essential for leaders to have enough humility to say, I don't know. Listen, as a parent, as a teacher, as a educator, as a business owner, as a leader within the organizations you work for, whether it be a church or whether it be a business or whatever it is, or on a team that you work on, it's essential that you operate with a level of humility laced with transparency. Say, hey, where can I find the information? It doesn't diminish your ability to be impactful. It's just saying, hey, where can I find the information so that I can execute at a level that I know I have the capacity to execute? That's critically important. That's critically important for you as a leader. You have to be able to execute at a level that is representative of how you operate in the world. Really important. And I think in our development, in our growth, and in the impact that we're trying to make in our communities, it's critically essential that you and I say, you know what, let me get out the way. Let me partner with people that are doing things that are incredible. Let me partner with folks that are actually engaged in particular ways. Let me engage in some ways that empowers me, but empowers the individuals around me to be impactful. Let me do it. Because it's critically important that I operate that way and that I recognize that I have a responsibility to the people that I serve. That's essential. But I'm going to stop right here. I got one more point, y'all. Please come back. I got one more point. I'm going to stop right here. I'll be right back after this message. Want to promote your business, products, or services? Email me at scottconsultations@gmail.com. I would love to push forward the banner of what you're trying to accomplish, whether it is a product, whether it's your services or your business. I would love to work with you and be an advocate for what you're doing in your respective spaces. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you. And we are back. Thank you for watching and or listening to this episode of Lead with Lee. I hope you've been inspired to continuously do some things that you need to do, that you will engage in ways that I think is critically important for you and I, especially in this moment in time, that we be people that are willing to go the extra mile because we believe that it's important for us to do this work. So my last point is be proactive in engaging. Even in this cycle, the numbers have come back in many ways through the primary that only about 22% of the folks that live in the community that I live in, if you're in Ward 6, voted in the primary. Now, meaning roughly, that basically means roughly 32,000 people voted out of the 16,000 people that are eligible to vote. Okay. 3,200. Out of the 16,000 people that are eligible to vote. Now, what it indicates to me is a variety of things. Okay. Number one, it indicates to me that either one or two things. Either there was a discrepancy in information. This is not whether, let me be very clear in my expression of this. This is not me criticizing or saying anything negative about whether people vote or not. That's not what this is about. It's just an analysis of a reality. So you're telling me that 16,000 people were eligible to vote, but only 3,200 voted. So I think that there are a variety of things that happen. One is there might, again, as I stated earlier, there's some information discrepancies, right? There's some information discrepancies because if there's some discrepancies with the information, we were hearing I mean, even it's like I heard that people polling stations had changed on them, like within weeks of the election. Polling stations changed, ballots were different. All these different things had probably transpired throughout this cycle, and I think it's really important for people to know that if that is the sentiment or the feeling of individuals, it creates a level of hopelessness if they feel like they are not getting all the information. People tend to disengage when they have done something and did not get their expected result. It's a fact of life. This is not something that just is specific to this election. It is something that's just a fact of life. Prime example of this. If you go to a restaurant and the first time you have an experience with this restaurant, the service is bad, they get your order wrong, that you can never find your waiter, people are rude to you, people engage with you in a particular way, and it makes you be like, what's going on? More than likely, you're not going there for another time, right? You're not going to give them a second chance. Why? Because they have proven to you that in your first experience, you are not a priority or you are not worth engaging. And so many times, voters in my community have voted. They have engaged in particular elections. And I even have voters say to me, Lee, this is going to be the only time I see you because you're asking me for my vote. There is no guarantee you're going to make it an essential part of how you go forward to come back and ask me questions. Are you going to come back and ask me again? Are you going to continue to engage? Are you going to continue to have the conversation? Huh? Because I believe that you're not going to be proactive in your engagement. Politicians say this. Folk who run for office say this, right? These are the understand, these are the responses that I'm getting from people. Not because they don't believe that things can change. It's just they have been pushed to a place of disengagement, which means that individuals who say they want to represent them have to go out and get certain things from them, have to engage in certain ways. My thought process was, if I want to create some level of transparency, I must be visible with the public. Must host community meetings. I must use social media to my advantage. I must have conversations. I must get out there and walk the streets again. I know that seems crazy to some people, but you already got their votes. Why would you get out there and walk again? Well, to be quite frank, you still have to engage voters. It is a constant engagement. I'm going back to the event I was at a few weeks ago. Voter registration and voter education is not something that stops when an election ends. Because let's be quite frank and quite clear, there are elections happening every year. Whether you're paying attention or not, there's an election happening in your city, in your state, in your community. Somebody is getting elected to something. If you're not even watching this in America or listening to this in America, somebody's getting elected in your community. Somebody's running for office in your city or your town or your township or wherever you are around the world. Somebody. And so it's critically important for you to understand that if somebody is making a decision about my life, that I should require that individual to be engaging with me. It is critically important for me to hold them accountable. It is critically important for me to ask them all the questions. Right? That's critically important. That's not something that you just should be trivial about. It's something that is as critical. And so when you recognize that as a part of the way you engage, it keeps people engaged because you keep going to them. Leadership is not about people coming to you. It's about you coming to people. Meeting people where they are. Meeting people in the spaces that they are in. It does not mean that you change or do anything that is kind of against how you operate in the world. But it is essential that you, in your leadership, in your development, go out of your way to engage the folks that you want to support you. Because that shows them that you are willing to do things a little bit differently than they have seen before. In order to build a more engaged and productive society, people have to feel like they are a part of the decision making. Now, there are some theoretical things that people have about being a part of that. There's an organization even here in our city that has been engaged in the work of creating people assemblies. That's what they call them. They've been engaged in the work of trying to get people in their community to engage. There are different forms of this. There's a particular organization here in Jackson too that they do this all the time with church leaders called Bridging the Gap. The leader Cameron Tate, he's been engaged in this work of trying to gather church leaders engaged. There are different types of organizations that do this type of work. You're community based. Now, there's a responsibility to you as a citizen to engage those organizations. But it's also critically important that those organizations come to you. Because if they never engage, if they never do the things that are critically important for you, we are wasting our time and our energy when we don't do that for you. In order for our society to change, we got to be proactive. Now, again, I say this as someone who I didn't get elected. And that's actually okay. Because there's a lot of opportunities that have come into my life, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in the next episode. But I can tell you, based on what I would have said, as I said, this is part one, that it requires engagement. It requires conversation. It requires constantly going back to the well of saying, hey, I don't know all the answers. How are we doing? A monthly newsletter is super important. Social media posts are super important. All these different things are super important. Listen, there are conversations that need to be had among individuals that did not win on how we can still make our community better. We all had great ideas. We still want our communities to be better because it got to be bigger than us. It's about serving the people that we say that we want to serve. It's about making our community better. It's about reinvesting in the community that we say that we want to be a part of. But it's going to take all of us engaging. Well, I hope you were inspired today. I hope you will take this to mind. And I will see you here next time here on Leading with Lee. Much love. Peace. Thank you for watching and listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. I'm so grateful that you have listened and engaged with this content. And if you want to learn more information about me, visit www.leadingwithlee.co to know about my services and things that I am doing. I hope that you will also follow me on social media at Leading with Lee, and follow me on my personal social media at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II on all social media platforms. I'm so grateful that you've listened. I'm so grateful that you engaged this content. Much love, and let's get started.